Along these rails, New York stands guard for danger. On a beautiful Indian summer morning, it struck from the most unlikely quarter, right out of the clear blue sky. An unprecedented catastrophe that stopped New York in its tracks. People remember two kinds of images from 9/11. This is the other one. Hundreds of thousands of subway riders walking for safety, walking for home, walking anywhere. In the wake of the terrorist attack on New York's World Trade Center, the world's biggest subway system shut down. All day long, the whole world watched the horror unfolding above ground. No one saw what happened below. A transit catastrophe. When the Twin Towers fell, the collateral damage took out the Cortlandt Street subway station. Almost 430 meters of tunnel destroyed. 4 subway lines severed. Passengers escaped, but 3 trains were crushed under a mountain of rubble. But this is New York, the city that never sleeps and never stops moving. Before the day was over, New York began drafting plans to restore service and rebuild. Dusting off blueprints from 1915, architects designed a new station. It took months just to clear the rubble. Experts said it would take years to rebuild. They were wrong. 1 year and 4 days after 9/11, all 4 subway lines had reopened. A triumph in the wake of tragedy. But at Ground Zero itself, the transit system was still digging out from under. The station hit hardest lay 5 floors beneath the World Trade Center. End of the line for the Port Authority Trans-Hudson Corporation, the PATH train. From terminals in Newark and Hoboken, the railway crosses the Hudson River via 2 tunnels. One line runs to the Penn Station subway stop, the other to the World Trade Center. PATH is one of the world's smallest railways, just 23 kilometers. But it links northern New Jersey to all 1,300 kilometers of the New York subway system. Each day, the trains make hundreds of trips, carrying almost 200,000 commuters. Like the subway, PATH trains stay in perpetual motion.
I mean, some people come from other places and they tell me, oh, what time do I have to be back from the city? You know, but what time do you, was your last? I said, we run 24 hours. Passengers with backpacks.
Bob Garcia has been a PATH conductor for 2 decades.
Also, passengers. I enjoy being in the car with the passengers, and I think the passengers feel a lot safer, too. You have to remember, since 9/11, things have changed. We lost our innocence because now any little delays, anything that happens on our system, passengers tend to look up.
Every day, Garcia pulled into the PATH station beneath the Twin Towers.
World Trade Center is our final stop. It was a city within a city. You had over 50,000 people. You were so alive when you were down here. Where you would see it mostly is when you came out for lunch on a beautiful day, when everyone was coming out of the buildings. And then, of course, you would sometimes look up and see these majestic mountains just staring down at you.
Then came 9/11.
The only way you can describe it is like a death in the family.
The collapse of the World Trade Center's South Tower obliterated the PATH station. The station is the lowest point on the Trade Center site. All the water from fighting the fires poured in. broken water mains flooded the Path Tunnel all the way to New Jersey. Workers built a temporary plug to seal the tunnel. It took 40 days to pump all the water out. A crucial link to the subway system was destroyed. Now began the hard work, rebuilding. An unprecedented feat of transit engineering. Workers gutted 1.5 kilometers of tunnels. They replaced ties, track, ductwork, and strung almost 100 kilometers of cable. All the while, other crews worked 16-hour days, 6 days a week, to rebuild the entire station from scratch. In November 2003, the station reopened, the first public space to open on the Trade Center site since 9/11. Workers finished the job 1 month ahead of schedule.
Said it couldn't be done, but it was done.
Yet the real work has just begun. This station is only temporary. From unprecedented tragedy has emerged a rare opportunity, the chance to reinvent the ancient infrastructure at the heart of a modern megacity. This gaping hole is destined to become a thriving hub.
We are going to build a new transit center here, and that is the first terminal that Lower Manhattan will have.
Charles Gargano is vice chairman of the Port Authority. His vision of a new Path station is destined to link up with another bold transformation just blocks away. With more than 250,000 entries, exits, and transfers each day, Fulton Street is the busiest subway station in Lower Manhattan. It's also the most confusing, a subterranean jigsaw puzzle, and the pieces don't fit. The Fulton Street subway station is actually a complex of 6 stations, built over 3 decades, to serve 12 competing subway lines, each fighting for passengers. Discouraging transfers between lines was deliberately built in. For almost a century, commuters groped through this transit nightmare. Then it got worse. When the Path train station was built, no one envisioned a link to Fulton. The result? 2 key rail hubs and no connection. Now comes a multi-billion-dollar operation to untangle veins and unclog arteries, to smooth transfers among subway lines and tunnel a direct connection between the subway and the trains. Stations will be consolidated into one vast hub. Connections will be direct. Moving walkways will flow from one system to the next. In turn, the new Path hub will forge direct connections to buses, ferries, and subway lines. It's no mere facelift, it's major surgery to close a gaping wound and put a shattered puzzle back together. Slated for completion by 2009, this grand central station has a grand price tag, $2 billion. In the eyes of the beholders, it's money well spent for a city in perpetual motion.
And they will have an ease of moving from location to location, from transit system to transit system. That's the ultimate goal.
Ease of movement is the very purpose of the subway and its genius. Sooner or later, the tracks end, but not the connections. By linking to every other transit system in New York, the subway extends its reach far beyond the end of the line. Just blocks from the Path station, the subway system jumps the track and connects with a New York institution.
Security, Guy Molinari, changing slips in St. George.
Isolated in New York Harbor, Staten Island is the only borough in New York with no subway. But 5 miles away on Manhattan, Staten Island meets the subway at the Whitehall station. The link? The famed Staten Island Ferry. It takes you down to the water's edge and beyond. Every weekday, 5 boats move the equivalent of a large town. 104 daily trips, 70,000 passengers per day, 20 million people a year. Like the subway, the ferry runs 24 hours and never takes a holiday. Unlike the subway, it's free. It's New York's most reliable form of mass transit. More than 96% of the trips run on schedule, despite sleet, snow, fog, and traffic.
New York Harbor is one of the busiest harbors in the world, and of course the Staten Island Ferry is operating right in the middle of New York Harbor.
James DeSimone is Chief Operations Officer of the Staten Island Ferry. Today, he makes the crossing on the pride of his fleet, the Guy V. Molinari. It's bigger than his older ferries. Each trip, up to 4,400 lives are in his hands, about as many as 4 subway trains. Safety is at a premium. As it moves through New York's crowded harbor, the Molinari carries an electronic life preserver, the collision avoidance system. In real time, it constantly tracks the name, position, and course of every vessel in the harbor. Life-saving data when the fog rolls in and the harbor turns to pea soup. It keeps this critical link from sinking. Within half an hour, the ferry connects with the subway at the tip of Manhattan and puts commuters back on track. For most of its history, Lower Manhattan was as isolated as Staten Island. The oldest part of New York, it was an island unto itself, marooned between the Hudson River and the East River, cut off from the other boroughs. Today, a network of bridges and tunnels links Manhattan to the rest of the city and extends the reach of the subway to the farthest corners of the Big Apple. These links form the backbone of the subway system. If they break, the entire system shatters into fragments. Among the biggest links, the Manhattan Bridge. On its outside lanes, it carries the subway over the East River, between Manhattan and Brooklyn. Dr. Bojidar Yanev is an engineer for the city of New York. His job, safeguarding the bridge, not against terrorism, but time.
A bridge like this is like a machine. There is always something you need to fix, to oil, to repaint, to clean, and possibly to replace.
The Manhattan Bridge needed major repairs at a relatively early age. The threat came from the very trains it was built to carry. Held in place by steel cables, the Manhattan has the advantages and drawbacks of a suspension bridge. One advantage, it can flex. One drawback, it can flex. That drawback emerged when the first subway train crossed. As the heavy cars pass, the bridge sways. One side dips, the other rises, a full meter. Steel isn't made to flex. The relentless torsion snapped off beams spanning the lower roadway. The Manhattan Bridge was so neglected, the tracks finally had to be closed for repairs. In the 1980s, the city invested $2.5 billion in a 3-decade program to overhaul its bridges. On the Manhattan Bridge, engineers installed heavy steel braces to stop the swaying.
The effect was surprising even to us. The rocking motion really abated.
Thanks to major surgery, the bridge survived. So the subway rolls on.